The web turned 30 on Tuesday, I think it was, and then on Wednesday, something even more remarkable happened, something that affected even more people in the world. Facebook crashed. Did you guys know that? That one of the biggest companies in the world, Facebook, had its longest outage in its 15-year history. Some of Facebook's servers were down for over 24 hours, and it was just after the internet's birthday. Now, I have no idea if the two were related. I don't really understand that much of what happened. But as I couldn't log in and as I was thinking about it, I kept on wondering if Facebook was out all night partying with Google and Amazon, celebrating the birthday. I don't know. The only problem was, I had this joke. I thought it was kind of funny, but I couldn't share it with anybody because Facebook was down. I mean, am I going to text somebody? That's so old school. I had no one to share my joke with. Well, Thursday comes around, Facebook gets back online, and now people were mad at Facebook for crashing. I guess they wanted their money back. I don't know. But it just reminded me, you don't pay for Facebook, that's why I thought that joke was funny. But it just reminded me, we get angry at so many things in life. We get angry that we couldn't have the free service that we wanted. We get mad at things that we can't control, things that are out of our realm of influence. I mean, some things are worthy being mad about, but so often you and I, we get angry at things that are outside of our control. We get mad at somebody else's opinion. We get mad at the traffic patterns on the road. We get mad at the politicians we don't vote for. We get mad at our families, our coworkers, our neighbors. We get mad at sports, and we even name this month March Madness. What's the deal with all of our anger? Why is it so easy to get frustrated at things? And even worse, do you ever find yourself enjoying being angry? I mean, I know I do. I know that there's times when I want to be angry. And my wife, Carrie, will be in the room and I'll be ranting about something. And Carrie, she's just so kind and so optimistic. She'll say something positive about the situation that I'm mad at. And I just want to look at her and I say, honey, I want to be mad right now. Stop trying to make me feel better. Now, I'm going to let you in on something, a little bit of secret. Maybe it's not so much of a secret. When you and I get angry, here's what we try to do. We try to justify it. We want our anger to be okay. We want to be not only in the right, but we want to have the right to be angry. And so we're going to look at a story in the Bible today, a story that every temper tantrum thrower has ever looked to, if you're a believer, and said, see there, Jesus got angry. Jesus got angry, so therefore it's probably okay if I get angry too. Jesus goes into the temple in Jerusalem and he clears it out, turns over the tables, tells people to get out, but to understand why Jesus clears the temple and gets so angry, we have to look at what happens just before and just after that scene. And it all starts with a fig tree. In Mark chapter 11, Jesus gets mad at a fig tree. And to understand the temple anger, we have to understand this question. Why does Jesus curse the fig tree? And what if I told you that the answer to this question, why Jesus curses the fig tree, what if I told you that both the source and the purpose of Jesus' anger here has everything to do with an even bigger question that each of us have in life? What is your purpose in life? Now, that's a lot of pressure on a fig tree. Why is Jesus talking smack to a fig tree? What possible justification could there be for that? And what does that have to do with our meaning and our purpose in life? In Mark chapter 11, this is the week before Jesus goes to the cross. It says, the next day they were leaving Bethany, and Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. And when he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. And then he said to the tree, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And his disciples heard him say it. So why is Jesus so mad at this poor little fig tree? Verse 12 tells us that he was hungry and the tree had no fruit. So I wonder if Jesus was just hangry. You guys know what hangry means? That's hungry plus angry. Jesus was saying, I did not find that word in any of my research this week. Maybe I'll petition to have it added to the theological journals. Was Jesus hangry? Did Jesus need to just grab a Snickers bar? I mean, the temple court, we'll look at it in a minute. We understand why he got mad in the temple court, right? They were taking advantage of the poor. They were selling things for too much money. That anger scene makes sense. But this one, what is up with the tree? I mean, Jesus curses the tree in verse 14. And we're not talking about using foul language. To curse somebody meant to do the exact opposite of blessing them. And so let's look a little bit closer. Of all the places that this could have taken place, I mean, fig trees grow throughout Israel. This scene takes place in Bethany. And Bethany literally means the house of dates. It means the house of figs. And Bethany was located on a mountain, on a hillside overlooking Jerusalem. So Jesus cursing a fig tree in the region known for its figs, that's giving us a little bit more insight. Let's take a short look at fig history in the Bible, or since I'm making up words this week, figstory in the Bible. Now, figs are a common image in the Old Testament. It's used over 40 times in Scripture, and it came to be known as a kind of a symbol for Israel, almost like you and I would think of the bald eagle as a symbol for the United States. And when you look throughout the Scriptures and you read the passages that talk about figs, the imagery that's associated with it is abundance and prosperity and peace. Check out a couple of ways that it's used in Scripture. I think we've got a slide with Micah from chapter 4. Each will sit under his own grapevine or under the fig tree without any fear. And the Lord who commands armies has decreed it. There's going to be peace and security, abundance and contentment. It's also going to be a time of fellowship. In the book of Kings, during Solomon's lifetime, Judah and Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, lived in safety, everybody under their own fig tree. Again, the prophet Zechariah says, "In that day, each of you will invite your neighbor to sit under your vine and fig tree, declares the Lord of your Almighty." So in times of peace and times of abundance, everybody has figs. Everybody has their own fig tree. Everything's going to be great. It's going to be peaceful. The fig tree was supposed to represent all of these things. But when the tree that Jesus encounters has no fruit. And Mark cleverly tells us, he gives us another clue. He says that it wasn't the season for figs. He says the tree was not in season. And when we read that, we think, okay, that should be it, right? Case closed. Why would you ever expect a tree that was out of season to produce fruit? I mean, I'm not expecting my grass to grow in December, right? I'm not trying to go snow sledding in May, and I'm not going to try to watch college basketball in the summer. When we look at this fig tree, we realize it's kind of big, right? It's at least the size of an apple tree. A tree in full leaf in Israel would grow to 15 to 25 feet tall. And in this part of Israel, fig trees would normally produce fruit about 6 weeks later than the scene that we're reading today. But there's something interesting. There's something unique about fig trees is that they have what's called, I call it a pre-season because I'm in March Madness mode. Fig trees have a pre-season. And like many fruit trees, before fully ripened fruit will be grown, a tree will produce a pre-season fruit, a green fig, if you will, a little knob it's edible, but it doesn't really taste good. And that's where the catch is. That's where the aha moment of this passage comes in. Like with any fruit tree, if the tree doesn't produce those pre-season fruits, that means that the tree is actually going to be barren. It's the small pre-season figs that guarantee the normal figs will come later. And so Jesus is lied to. Hungry Jesus is lied to by this tree. The tree looked like it was going to give off fruit because it was in full leaf. It showed every sign, every indication that it was a fruit-bearing tree. And that's why Jesus got so frustrated. Because throughout Scripture, the tree represented the nation of Israel, the people of God. And it was supposed to be a sign of peace and prosperity. But this tree was lying. Now, to be barren is one thing, but to have the appearance, to have the outward sign of fruitfulness, but then upon a close examination to have no fruit, this tree creates an opportunity to illustrate a powerful teaching. A teaching that Jesus brings into clear focus in the temple. And knowing that Jesus got mad at the fig tree tells us everything about what happens next. And the Gospel of Mark in this passage, he brilliantly puts these two scenes together. It's almost like he was inspired. Let's read from Mark chapter 11. Let's continue in chapter 11, verse 15. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. Jesus overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations,' but you have made it a den of robbers." All right, so here's the scene that we love, the scene that everyone who's lost their temper has loved. Hangry Jesus goes to church. And after seeing the deceptive fig tree, Jesus enters the temple just to find another one. Lots of action, lots of bustle, but no righteousness. Leaves, but no fruit. And Jesus knew that the time had come for God's people to yield fruit that would bless the world. But instead, in God's holy temple, the religious leaders had substituted out an empty procedure, a meaningless ritual, a performance-only process that ended up keeping people from experiencing the love of God. In the Jerusalem temple, it was an enormous building, a multi-layered structure with strict rules about who could enter where, who could go deeper into the heart of the building. There was a big outer area for the non-Jews, and that's where this action takes place. And it was there that over a series of progressive courts, you have to have a certain level of ordination, a certain level of holiness to go deeper and deeper into the temple. So the Gentiles could go on just the outer side, and then the Jews, and then the good Jews, and the priests, and then the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies. And the purpose behind the temple, and especially for the Holy of Holies, was to offer sacrifice on behalf of the people to deal for their sin. And that's why they were selling doves in the courts, not because doves made great pets, but because they were a small and inexpensive animal that could be offered as a sacrifice. But when we read this in the Gospel of Mark, this whole scene looks like one of the stores at a basketball game. Can you tell I'm getting ready for March Madness? When you go to a sports game, when you go to an arena, they charge as much as they can because they can get away with it. Can I have a slice of pizza? Sure, that'll be $20. That's the way the exchange rates were with the money changers in the temple. A dove that should have cost just a couple of pennies, they had marked it up so much more. And the net effect of all that chaos, the net effect of all of that greed and money seeking was to limit access to God. Because they went to the temple to make sacrifices. They went to the temple looking for forgiveness. And they were making it inaccessible to experience God. So Jesus clears out the temple. He gets mad on behalf of those who are being taken advantage of. And as fascinating as it is to imagine what this scene would have looked like, to picture Jesus throwing people out of the temple, the point of this story doesn't really have much to do with what Jesus did, but it has everything to do with what he said. In verse 17, Jesus taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations,' but you have made it a den of robbers." You have turned my house into a den of robbers. Now think about what that implies. Robbers, they're not swindlers. They're more like bandits. Swindlers cheat people in daylight, like the greedy money changers. But robbers, they do their robbing in the night. They don't do their robbing in the den. The den is where robbers go after they've already robbed the bait. They go back to the den to retreat. After having committed the crimes, it's their hideouts. The den is a place of security and refuge. When Jesus calls the temple a robber's den, he denounces the false security the religious leaders had in the temple. The leaders had allowed the temple to become a safe hiding place where people think that they find forgiveness and fellowship with God no matter how they act on the outside. And Jesus says, "You have turned my house into a den for robbers, a safe haven to hide your sin, a place where swindlers can hide in safety, a place where evil finds security, and maybe worst of all, a place where sin is lifted up as sacred." And to this, Jesus says, "No, I cannot stand for this. Not in my house, not anymore. This house is supposed to be a place where the broken find healing, a place where the lost can be found, a place where sinners can find forgiveness, not sanctuary for their sins. The temple that should have been a house of prayer for all nations had been turned into a den of robbers, and the temple as currently constructed was not producing fruit. The problem with the temple is the exact same problem with the fig tree. So Jesus clears it out. He makes the religious leaders really mad, and they decide once and for all, we've got to try to kill this guy. And after clearing out the temple, Jesus leaves with his disciples. And in verse 20, that's in the morning time, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. Peter remembered this and said to Jesus, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered." And as the disciples stood there in Bethany, as they stood on the hillside looking at the withered fig tree, if they had looked over to the right, they would have seen Jerusalem down on the hill. They would have seen the temple that Jesus had just cleared out. The temple that was so much like the fig tree. And in verse 22, Jesus ties it all together. He makes sense of the fig tree, of the temple, and of us. Jesus says, have faith in God. Truly, I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go, throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Now, this is kind of a hard verse. It's not Jesus' most clear explanation in the Gospels, is it? But notice that Jesus does not say faith moves mountains. He doesn't give it a plural. We often sing that in our songs, but that's not the right interpretation. That's not the right translation of this passage. It says, Jesus, if anyone says to this mountain, it's a rare phrase used in Scripture. And with Jesus and his disciples standing on a hillside in Bethany, looking back over the city of Jerusalem, they would have seen the temple, the top of the temple that you might remember is called the Temple Mount. This mountain must be moved, not physically, but spiritually. The Temple Mount, God's house, must be moved, and that can only happen by faith. Because faith alone can move the mountain where dead religion flourishes. This mountain, this Temple Mount, the place where people find forgiveness, the place that people go for healing, the place where throughout Scripture we learn is the dwelling place of God. This place will no longer be bound to one location. Jesus didn't want to just eat some figs. He doesn't clear out the temple so that he can restore it. He doesn't want a temple upgrade. He's not going to call Chip and Joanna and get a fixer-upper. He wants a temple upended. He wants it torn down and rebuilt in himself. And at the end of this week, he's going to do that by being stretched out on a cross. So why does Jesus curse the fig tree? Why does Jesus tear out the temple? And what does that have to do with our purpose and our meaning in life? Jesus took the place of the temple by taking your place on the cross. Jesus took the place of the temple by taking your place on the cross. People used to go to the temple to receive forgiveness of sins. They would go to the temple for sacrifice, for atonement, and Jesus says, not anymore. I'm going to take that place. People used to go to the temple to receive healing, and Jesus says, no, come to me, all who are weary. How can Jesus take the place of an entire temple? Because God can be no more bound to one location than Jesus can be bound to a tomb. Jesus took the place of the temple by taking your place on the cross, which is great news for us because unfortunately you and I have way too much in common with the religious leaders in the temple. Because many times, sometimes unintentionally, we prevent people from experiencing God. The money changers in the temple, they did this by charging high interest rates. And you and I, we make it hard for people to experience God when we tell others that they have to get right and they have to do the right things before Jesus will love them. Now, I don't think we do this on purpose all the times, but how many times have our actions implied that you have to be right before you can be with Jesus? And Jesus says no. Jesus says all you have to do is have faith. Faith is the only prerequisite from receiving forgiveness because Jesus took the place of the temple. He took your place on the cross not only so that we could receive forgiveness, but so that we could experience life with God. And the life that we have been created to live is dynamic. Jesus says, I have come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. Later that week, through Jesus' life, his death, and his resurrection, he made available to you and me this great invitation to bring God into our life and let him form us, to let him cultivate us like the fig tree should have been. See, fig trees exist for a purpose, to bear fruit. Fig trees produce fruit. Olive vines produce olives. Apple trees produce apples. Christians, followers of Jesus, what do we exist for? Our purpose in life is very simple, and I think we can summarize it in one phrase. Follow Jesus and help others do the same. That is our primary purpose in life, to follow Jesus and to help others follow Jesus, so that you and I could bear fruit by helping others follow Jesus. Fig trees make figs, disciples make disciples. Followers of Jesus help others follow Jesus. And in the church world, we call this discipleship. Jesus doesn't want us to simply look good on the outside. He doesn't want us to just go through the right motions and to post the right post on Facebook. He says, I want you to live in community. I want you to help other people follow Jesus. And we can experience that life with God together. We can be encouraged and challenged by one another. And we can help other people grow in their relationship with Christ. Being a follower of Jesus means that you will look at people differently and realize that everybody was made in the image of God. And Jesus longs and desires for all to come into relationship with him. Jesus took the place of the temple by taking your place on the cross. Would you go to the Lord with me in prayer as we close?